A nurse saves a newborn's life after a long, exhausting delivery in a Seattle hospital. Minutes later, she walks to her office and disappears without a trace. No struggle. No exit. Just 11 minutes of missing security footage. 25 years later, something horrifying is discovered deep in the ocean, and it's connected to that night. But what really happened to her? Imagine delivering a baby, saving a life, and then disappearing forever just minutes later. That's exactly what happened on a cold November night in Seattle, Washington. In 1999, St. Augustine Medical Center was preparing for what seemed like another routine childbirth. The maternity ward was quiet, the staff experienced, and the nurse in charge that night was one of the most trusted in the hospital, Nurse Emily Carter. At 2:14 a.m., she successfully delivered a healthy baby boy. Doctors congratulated her. The family celebrated. Everything seemed normal. But just minutes later, Emily told another nurse she was heading back to her office to complete paperwork. She walked down the hallway, and she was never seen again. No signs of struggle. No security footage showing her leaving the hospital. Her purse, phone, and car were still there. It was as if she simply vanished into thin air. For 25 years, investigators had no answers. Until one day, deep in the Pacific Ocean, a marine researcher made a discovery that would reopen the case. What makes the discovery even more disturbing is that the researcher was the same baby Emily Carter helped bring into the world the night she disappeared. Before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because this case only gets darker from here. The night of November 12, 1999, began like any other shift at St. Augustine Medical Center in Seattle, Washington. Rain tapped softly against the hospital windows as nurses moved through the quiet maternity ward. Among them was Emily Carter, a 32-year-old nurse known for her calm voice and steady hands during the most stressful deliveries. At 2:14 a.m., Emily helped deliver a healthy baby boy to a young couple who had been in labor for nearly 12 hours. The room filled with relief when the baby cried for the first time. "Strong lungs," Emily joked as she wrapped the newborn in a blanket. The parents thanked her repeatedly. To them, Emily wasn't just a nurse. She was the person who safely brought their son into the world. After the delivery, Emily stepped into the hallway where another nurse, Jessica Morgan, was finishing paperwork. "I'm heading to my office for a few minutes," Emily said. "Just need to finish the delivery report." Jessica nodded. Emily walked down the long, brightly lit corridor toward her small office near the nurses' station. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw Emily Carter alive. 10 minutes later, Jessica went to check on her. The office door was slightly open. The lights were on. But Emily Carter was gone. And what investigators would later discover about those 10 missing minutes would turn the hospital into the center of one of Washington's most chilling mysteries. When Emily Carter didn't return to the maternity ward, Jessica Morgan first assumed she had been called into another room. But after nearly 20 minutes passed, something began to feel wrong. Jessica walked down the hallway to Emily's office inside St. Augustine Medical Center in Seattle, Washington. The door was slightly open. Inside, Emily's desk lamp was still on. Her paperwork sat neatly on the table, half completed. Her coffee cup was still warm. But Emily Carter was nowhere to be found. Jessica immediately alerted the night supervisor. Within minutes, hospital staff began searching every floor of the building. They checked patient rooms, stairwells, storage areas, and even the hospital parking garage. Nothing. Emily's car was still parked outside. Her purse and phone were inside her locker. It didn't make sense. If she had left, she would have needed those things. At 3:05 a.m., hospital administration contacted the Seattle Police Department. Detectives arrived quickly and began reviewing the hospital's security footage. At first, everything looked normal. Cameras showed Emily leaving the delivery room and walking down the corridor toward her office. But when investigators reached the hallway camera outside her office, The footage suddenly cut to static. For exactly 11 minutes. When the video resumed, the hallway was empty. Emily Carter had vanished during a moment that, according to hospital records, should never have happened. And detectives were about to discover that someone inside the hospital may have known exactly why those cameras went dark. By sunrise, the disappearance of Emily Carter had turned St. Augustine Medical Center in Seattle, Washington into an active crime scene. Detectives from the Seattle Police Department began questioning every staff member who had worked the night shift. Doctors, janitors, security guards, and nurses were all interviewed one by one. Most of them described Emily the same way. Kind. Professional. Loved by patients. She had no enemies that anyone knew of. But one interview quickly caught the detectives' attention. A hospital maintenance technician named Daniel Brooks appeared unusually nervous during questioning. According to hospital logs, Daniel had been working on electrical systems on the same floor where Emily disappeared. At first, he claimed he had been fixing a lighting issue near the emergency stairwell around 2:20 a.m. But when detectives compared his statement with the building's work orders, something didn't match. There had been no request for electrical repairs that night. When investigators pressed him about it, Daniel struggled to explain why he was even on that floor. Then came another disturbing discovery. Security records showed that Daniel Brooks had access to the hospital's camera control system, the same system that recorded the hallway outside Emily's office. The exact hallway where the footage mysteriously cut out for 11 minutes. But before detectives could dig deeper, Daniel Brooks suddenly quit his job just 3 days after Emily vanished. And after that, he seemed to disappear almost as completely as Emily Carter herself. 3 days after Emily Carter disappeared from St. Augustine Medical Center in Seattle, Washington, detectives returned to question Daniel Brooks. But when they arrived at his small apartment on the outskirts of the city, something was immediately wrong. The place was empty. The landlord told investigators Daniel had packed his things late the previous night and left without warning. He didn't leave a forwarding address. He didn't explain where he was going. It was as if he had simply decided to vanish. Inside the apartment, detectives searched every room for clues. Most of Daniel's belongings were gone, but a few things had been left behind, items he may have forgotten in his rush to leave. One of them immediately caught the detective's attention. A small notebook hidden inside a kitchen drawer. At first glance, it looked like random scribbles, work schedules, phone numbers, grocery lists. But several pages had something far more disturbing. Dates, times, and a strange pattern of notes about hospital security cameras. One entry was circled in red ink. NOV 12 to 2:16 a.m., cameras offline. That was the exact moment the hallway cameras had stopped recording the night Emily Carter vanished. But the most chilling part wasn't the note itself. It was what was written directly underneath it. Just 2 words. Finally done. Despite the disturbing clues surrounding Daniel Brooks, detectives from the Seattle Police Department struggled to build a solid case. They searched for him across Washington state, checking bus stations, airports, and financial records. But Daniel seemed to have disappeared without leaving a trace. No bank activity. No phone calls. No sightings. It was as if he had simply stepped off the map. Meanwhile, the investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance continued for months. Officers searched nearby forests, rivers, and abandoned buildings around Seattle, Washington. Volunteers joined large search parties. Helicopters scanned remote areas. But nothing connected to Emily was ever found. No clothing. No personal belongings. No sign of a struggle. Inside St. Augustine Medical Center, the maternity ward eventually returned to normal operations, but the staff never forgot the night their colleague vanished. Patients whispered about it in waiting rooms. Some nurses even refused to work the overnight shift alone. As months turned into years, the case slowly lost momentum. New detectives inherited the file, But without new evidence, there was little they could do. Eventually, Emily Carter's disappearance was officially labeled a cold case. For 25 years, her family waited for answers that never came. But thousands of miles away, deep beneath the waters of the Pacific Ocean, something connected to Emily Carter was resting silently on the ocean floor. And the person who would eventually discover it had been there the night she disappeared, as a newborn baby. 25 years after Emily Carter disappeared from St. Augustine Medical Center in Seattle, Washington, the case had faded from most people's memories. But in the summer of 2024, a research vessel from the University of Washington was conducting a deep-sea survey in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Washington state. On board the vessel was Dr. Michael Turner, a 25-year-old marine researcher specializing in ocean floor mapping. What made his presence on that ship strangely symbolic was something he didn't often think about. Michael had been born at St. Augustine Medical Center. The nurse who helped deliver him that night had been Emily Carter. But Michael had only heard the story in passing from his parents. To him, it was just a strange piece of local history. That morning, the research team lowered a remotely operated vehicle nearly 3,000 feet below the ocean surface to collect samples. As the robotic camera moved across the dark seabed, something unusual appeared on the monitor. A metal container, partially buried in the sand. At first, the team assumed it was old fishing equipment or debris from a shipwreck. But when the robotic arm pulled the container closer to the camera, everyone in the control room fell silent. Because something inside the container looked disturbingly human. And when Michael leaned closer to the screen, he had no idea that what they had just found might finally reveal what happened to Emily Carter all those years ago. The crew aboard the research vessel carefully lifted the metal container from the ocean floor and brought it onto the deck. No one spoke as the team gathered around it. Dr. Michael Turner felt an uneasy knot forming in his stomach. Something about the discovery didn't feel like ordinary ocean debris. The research team immediately contacted authorities, and within hours the United States Coast Guard arrived to secure the scene. The container was transported back to Seattle for forensic examination. Inside, investigators made a disturbing discovery. Human remains. They appeared to be skeletal fragments that had been sealed inside the metal container for decades. Despite years underwater, the sealed environment had preserved critical evidence. The remains were sent to specialists at the King County Medical Examiner's Office for testing. 4 weeks, forensic experts ran DNA analysis, comparing the genetic material to missing persons records. Then the results came back. The DNA matched a sample provided decades earlier by the family of Emily Carter. After 25 years, the missing nurse from Seattle had finally been found. But the discovery raised even more terrifying questions. How had Emily's remains ended up 3,000 feet deep in the Pacific Ocean? And who had sealed them inside that container? Investigators quickly reopened the cold case. Because someone had clearly gone to extreme lengths to hide the truth. And the name that immediately resurfaced in the investigation was the same man detectives had once suspected long ago. Daniel Brooks. After the remains of Emily Carter were identified in Seattle, detectives from the Seattle Police Department reopened the case that had haunted the city for decades. The first name investigators revisited was the same man who had raised suspicions years earlier. Daniel Brooks. Back in 1999, Brooks had worked as a maintenance technician at St. Augustine Medical Center. He had access to the hospital's electrical systems and security cameras, including the hallway where the cameras mysteriously went offline the night Emily vanished. But after quitting his job just 3 days later, he had completely disappeared. Now detectives decided to dig deeper than ever before. They searched through decades of old records, property databases, and archived documents. Eventually, they found something chilling. 2 months after Emily's disappearance, Daniel Brooks had quietly purchased a used fishing boat registered under a different name in a small coastal town near Port Angeles, Washington. The purchase had gone largely unnoticed at the time. But what disturbed investigators most was the timeline. The boat was registered just weeks before the ocean currents in that region would have been strong enough to carry objects far out into the Pacific Ocean. And records showed Brooks had taken the boat out alone multiple times shortly after Emily vanished. Investigators now believed the ocean had not been a random hiding place. It had been part of a carefully planned disposal. But the biggest mystery still remained. Where was Daniel Brooks now? Because after 25 years, he had never been found either. With the discovery of Emily Carter's remains, detectives from the Seattle Police Department intensified their search for the man who had long been considered the prime suspect, Daniel Brooks. For years, investigators believed Brooks had either fled the country or died somewhere without being identified. But modern technology gave detectives something they didn't have back in 1999. Digital records. Using updated identity databases and financial tracking systems, investigators began comparing Daniel Brooks' personal records with thousands of name changes and Social Security registrations across the United States. Then a possible match appeared. A man named David B. Larson had applied for a new Social Security record in 2002 in San Diego, California. The paperwork looked normal at first glance. But when investigators compared Larson's old driver's license photo with archived photos of Daniel Brooks, the similarities were impossible to ignore. The facial structure. The same scar above the right eyebrow. Even the birth date was only 2 days different from Brooks' original records. Detectives now believed Daniel Brooks had been living under a new identity for over 2 decades. They immediately contacted authorities in San Diego and began preparing a warrant. After 25 years of silence, investigators were finally close to confronting the man they believed knew exactly what happened to Emily Carter. But when officers arrived at the address connected to David Larson, they were about to discover something that would make the case even darker than anyone expected. When detectives from the Seattle Police Department contacted authorities in San Diego, they believed they were finally about to confront the man they had searched for since 1999. The address linked to David B. Larson, the identity investigators believed belonged to Daniel Brooks, was a small house near the coastline. Local officers knocked on the door. No answer. After obtaining permission to enter the property, they stepped inside and quickly realized something was wrong. The house looked abandoned. Dust covered the furniture. Mail had piled up near the door, some of it unopened for years. But in the back bedroom, investigators found the most disturbing clue yet. A small locked trunk. Inside were old newspaper clippings from Seattle about the disappearance of Emily Carter. Every article had been carefully preserved. But there was one final document placed neatly on top of the pile. A death certificate. It belonged to David B. Larson. According to records, the man had died in 2012, more than a decade earlier, which meant the man detectives believed to be Daniel Brooks had been dead for years. The only person who could have explained what truly happened to Emily Carter had taken that secret to the grave. And after 25 years, the mystery of why she was taken and what exactly happened inside that hospital during those missing 11 minutes may never be fully known. Even after 25 years, the disappearance of Emily Carter remains one of the most haunting mysteries connected to Seattle. A nurse walks down a hospital hallway after successfully delivering a baby and simply vanishes. For decades, her family waited for answers. Investigators chased leads that went nowhere. The case slowly faded into the background as one more unsolved mystery in the files of the Seattle Police Department. Then, a shocking discovery deep in the Pacific Ocean reopened everything. But instead of providing closure, it only raised even darker questions. Why was Emily targeted? What really happened during those missing 11 minutes inside St. Augustine Medical Center? And if Daniel Brooks truly was responsible, was he acting alone? Sometimes, the truth sinks so deep that it may never fully surface again. Cases like this remind us that even the safest places can hide terrifying secrets. If this story gave you chills, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life mysteries and true crime stories. And tell me in the comments, do you think Daniel Brooks was the only one involved? Or was there someone else inside the hospital who helped make Emily Carter disappear?